In 1968, I met my late husband Bernie in Minneapolis, Minnesota, while he was on leave in the U.S. Navy. He was an alcoholic, although I didn't realize it at that time. He was a career Navy man, and drinking was a large part of his life. We fell in love and moved to San Diego, California. I had been raised in a Christian home and knew the Lord at an early age, but when I became a teenager, I rebelled and went my own way. After an early marriage from which I had 2 children, that marriage ended in divorce. Life in California with Bernie was fun and exciting, and drinking was a part of our lives. I tried to keep up with Bernie, but he could drink me under the table and keep going. We were married in July of 1970. I began to realize that Bernie was hopelessly addicted to alcohol, not realizing my own addiction to alcohol. In 1975, Bernie's ship, the USS Constellation, came to Bremerton for an overhaul, and I had the privilege of riding the Constellation to Bremerton as a Navy dependent. We settled in Bremerton, and Bernie's drinking grew heavier. One morning, early, I woke up to find him in the kitchen drinking. He told me he couldn't stop and needed help. At that time, he entered the alcohol rehab program at the Naval Hospital. When he quit drinking, his family blamed me for his drinking, causing a big family separation which lasted for several years. At the time Bernie entered the Navy rehab program, I realized I needed help from my drinking and the family problems it had caused, so I went back to church, Hillcrest Assembly in Bremerton, and recommitted my life back to the Lord. Bernie was clean and sober for about 16 months. During this time, I faithfully attended church and was growing spiritually as a Christian. When the Constellation returned to San Diego, Bernie went to San Diego and transferred to the USS Kitty Hawk, which was scheduled to come to Bremerton for overhaul. During this time in San Diego, Bernie relapsed. A few months later, he retired from the Navy. By this time, his drinking was heavy again. This continued for several years. In early 1980, when I couldn't take his drinking any longer, I made plans to leave him. I secured an apartment and planned to move out. My pastor called and asked us to come for a counseling appointment in order to preserve our marriage. It was during this counseling session that Bernie realized his need to commit his life to Jesus Christ. He turned his life over to the Lord that day, May 29, 1980, and was totally saved and delivered from the desire to drink alcohol. 2 years later, we felt the Lord leading us to start a Christian-based support group. In 1983, the Lord impressed upon a lady, Nancy Block, to contact our church and offer her help and assistance for this type of outreach. At that time, we became affiliated with a ministry called Deliverance Ministries out of Bellevue. We started a support group in Silverdale and worked with this ministry until early 1985. In the spring of 1985, we felt the Lord leading us to start our own Christian-based support ministry, and with the help and assistance of our pastor, Raymond Jennings, HAD Ministries was born in May of 1985. In 1992, Bernie was diagnosed with cancer and given 6 months to live. My friends and church prayed diligently for Bernie's healing. I lived in a state of denial until the last few months of Bernie's life. I was sure God was going to heal him and keep him here, but God didn't do it my way. He healed Bernie, the perfect healing, and took him to heaven in September of 1994. Those were the dark years for me from 1994 to 1999. During this time, HAD Ministries dwindled down to a few people. Those who did come to my support group ministered to me. I was spiritually bankrupt and had nothing to give my people, and they ministered to me and loved me. There were many times I would come to HAD and no one would show up. I would play my guitar and sing for 45 minutes and go home. Several people suggested that maybe HAD Ministries had run its course and maybe it was time to move on. Something inside me wouldn't let me quit. Today I realize it was God. In 2001, the company I was working for went bankrupt and closed its doors, so I was on unemployment for 10 months. During this time, I knew in my heart that God was calling me full-time to HAD Ministries. I blossomed during these 10 months, and HAD Ministries grew in number. When my unemployment ran out, I became scared and went to work again. I worked full time with HAD Ministries, getting my leftover energy until November of 2005. God kept working on me and calling me, and when I could no longer put off that still small voice, I left my full-time employment and took this huge leap of faith and began HAD Ministries here at Living Word Christian Center. Living Word had no money to put me on staff, but they did it anyway, and God provided and has continued to provide. In my first HAD meeting here at Living Word, there were 12 people in attendance. In 2008, HAD Ministries opened a clean and sober home for women called Heidi House, named after a young lady named Heidi who went through inpatient treatment at Kitsap Recovery Center. She gave her life to the Lord during one of the HAD Ministry Sunday church services. Heidi's health was broken and she went to be with Jesus in 2006. Today, 5 years later, I have 3 support groups which meet each week. Anywhere from 65 to 90 people attend HAD Ministry support groups. I'm also very committed to the Kitsap County Drug Court program and attend drug court each Thursday afternoon and Friday morning to support those going through drug court. God has truly blessed me. He has given me very good health and incredible stamina to do what He has called me to do. I work with an excellent team of group leaders and musicians who has helped HAD Ministries grow as it is today. Thank you to all of you who have helped me, supported me, believed in me, and prayed for me.